This third generation Lexus IS is much improved, but it's still tasked with the same simple mission. It needs to be a car that you'd enjoy owning more than a Mercedes C-Class, an Audi A4 or a BMW 3 Series, the three leading choices in the compact executive saloon segment. The objective then is straightforward, but achieving it is anything but, as other brands who simply tried to copy the winning Teutonic formula have found to their cost. Lexus used to be one of these, but with this Mark III Model IS they've been a bit cleverer, primarily through the offering of petrol-electric hybrid power rather than the kind of 2-litre diesel engine business buyers will be used to. It's a refreshing approach for people in search of something just that little bit different.
Here's an interesting car, the Lexus IS. This is a lightly improved version of the third generation model we first saw in 2013, and it's claimed to be smarter, safer, better to drive, and still very different, not least in the way it champions hybrid power in this segment. The uniqueness of this car remains its most important selling point. After all, for many potential buyers, its main appeal lies not in what it is, but in what it isn't, namely a BMW, an Audi or a Mercedes, these being the three Teutonic heavyweight brands which dominate the compact executive saloon sector that this Japanese contender competes in. As a result, our company car parks are overflowing with 3 Series, A4 and C-Class models, with the cars in question nearly all powered by clattery diesel engines and mainly driven via the kind of over-firm, sporty setups that the magazines insist buyers should have. If, though, you're fed up with these predictable choices and you want something that reinterprets what a car of this kind should be, then this, we'd suggest, is one of the places you should start your search. With the first generation version of this model, launched back in 1998, Lexus messed around with different body shapes. With the Mark II design of 2005, the brand dabbled with diesel power. When this third generation arrived in mid-2013, though, you sensed that at last Lexus was more comfortable in itself, content to concentrate on its strengths, no longer feeling the need to copy what others were doing. Sure enough, almost everything about this IS is different from the norm in its chosen segment. The styling, the single saloon body style, the absence of manual transmission, and perhaps most notably, the fact that no, you can't have a diesel. Here instead, you get a unique 4-door look and an overwhelming emphasis on petrol-electric hybrid power with its sensible running costs and its limo-like silent startup. But of course, a lot has changed since this model's original introduction back in 2013. The three German class leaders have all been forced to up their games by the arrival of Jaguar's desirable XE, whilst those wanting something distinctly different in this segment are also now being targeted by cars like the Alfa Romeo Giulia and the Infiniti Q50. Hence the need for this revised, re-engineered third generation IS model. Can it continue to be the car to alter traditional customer thinking about hybrid power, about German brand domination, and about even Lexus itself? Let's try it. Get comfortable behind the wheel in this IS, and if you like your driving, well, first impressions are good. If you agree with BMW, Jaguar and Alfa Romeo that compact executive saloons are meant to feel sporty, you'll bond immediately with the driving position of this one, with its low set placement and its grippy 3-spoke wheel. There is a feeling of dynamic purpose here that you just don't get in an ordinary C-Class or A4. It's precisely this that Lexus has tried to emphasise with the handling changes made to this revised third generation model. Basically, the whole suspension system has been taken apart and redesigned, and that's a pretty unusual initiative to take as part of a mere mid-term facelift. As a result, the components are now nearly 50% more rigid than they were before, which, along with improvements to the body shell rigidity, means that body roll is reduced through the bends. Now, if you happen to be familiar with the original version of this third generation model, this is where you'll also feel that the car responds a little more sharply than before. Improvements to the steering settings further help here, and the new suspension componentry helps the helm to deliver better response at cruising speeds. Now you should feel this improved IS to be more comfortable in urban motoring too, thanks to alterations to the coil rates and the shock absorber settings that allow damping force to be generated from lower speeds. It's all good, and as far as we can make out, it all works as advertised. But it is a little frustrating that equal effort hasn't been put into dealing with more pressing problems. Almost all IS buyers choose hybrid power with this car, and for the time being anyway, Lexus decrees that a non-negotiable part of its hybrid Synergy drive powertrain is a lethargic, belt-driven ECVT auto gearbox that hobbles this car every time you put pedal to the metal. It's a fine and rather sweet shifting thing when you're ambling about, but if you press the throttle hard, the revs roar and, well, not a great deal happens. Even without this issue, this petrol-powered IS would lack the mid-range grunt of its direct 2-litre diesel rivals. As it is, well, let's just say that it certainly doesn't feel as if you've got 223 bhp of power at your disposal, and that's the claimed total output of this IS 300H model's 2.5-litre hybrid unit. The sales figures suggest that most IS buyers are quite happy to work around this issue, as we have been happy to do throughout this test. Get into a hybrid mindset and you'll find this car a quiet and enjoyable means of business transport, but it just could be so much more. Hyundai has shown with its Ioniq model that a conventionally responsive cog-driven auto gearbox can quite happily work with petrol-electric power, and Lexus urgently needs to copy that approach with the next generation version of this IS. In fact, a very good auto box does already feature in the IS lineup the Sports Direct Shift transmission that's borrowed from the brand's stonkingly fast RCF Performance Coupe, and which is fitted to the second engine option that's offered to buyers of this car, the conventional 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol turbo unit that's found in the IS 200T model. You'd be forgiven for not knowing that this variant even existed. Almost nobody in our market buys it, and Lexus almost encourages folk not to by limiting its availability to the priciest trim levels on offer. They're as aware as the company car decision makers are that the efficiency readings of that conventional power plant lag some way behind the figures achieved by comparable 2-litre petrol turbo rivals, which is a pity really, because in other respects the 245 bhp unit is a quiet and likeable thing. It's certainly very responsive, making 62 mph from rest in 7 seconds. That's nearly half a second quicker than the IS 300H. Nor are there the restrictions that limit the maximum speed of this hybrid variant to 124 miles an hour. An IS 200T improves that to 143 miles an hour. Which we will admit is not very relevant after all. When was the last time you drove at over 120 mph? Cars like this IS 300H are designed for the real world, so let's drive with a real world demeanour and see how it stacks up. If you're coming to this Lexus from a 2-litre diesel rival, as the Japanese brand hopes you will be, one of the first differences that you'll notice on the move will lie in the way the hybrid system goes about creating its impressive efficiency by allowing the engine to rev up and down in a way that's really quite unconnected to your actual road speed. Now, as drivers, we tend to rely on these auditory cues to gauge how fast we're going. For example, during deceleration, when you hear the engine note play down different tones through different gears. In this IS, though, you can be decelerating while the engine note is ascending the scales, and it all takes a little bit of getting used to. Lexus's answer to this problem is rather novel. This little ASC, or active sound control switch, down here to the right of the steering wheel. Now it activates a loudspeaker emitting a synthesized engine noise, the pitch of which is governed by the speedometer. Yes, really. So as you slow, so does the aural accompaniment. Throw in a downshift and you'll hear the sound flare in response, and you even get 6 frequency registers for the 6 gears that you can control via these steering wheel paddles. A gimmick? Well, in almost any other car we would have said yes, but here it really does help you attune to hybrid motoring that little bit quicker. The noise synthesizer even makes a reasonable attempt at simulating a V6 growl at full throttle, although ideally we'd have tuned it to change up to the sound of the Lexus LFA supercar's howling V10. Anyway, if you find the whole setup annoying, you can easily turn it down or switch it off. But you shouldn't need to, because once you're up at cruising speeds, it doesn't intervene anyway. This IS300H then reverts to the kind of whisper-quiet progress that was previously the preserve of top-end luxury saloons. At lower speeds, as with most full hybrids, this car can trickle along powered by the 230-volt nickel metal hydride battery pack, as it will from start off, or with just the engine if you're giving it full throttle, or more usually with a combination of both. And that's something you can monitor via a selectable energy monitor display on the infotainment screen in the centre of the dash. And unlike, say, an old Honda hybrid, you don't have to have the combination approach if you don't want it, as long as the engine's warmed up. Pressing this EV button near the gear stick will keep the car in all-electric mode for anything between a few hundred metres to just over half a mile, provided there's charge in the battery and you keep to below 25 miles an hour. Once you do need to use the engine, you get the usual hybrid benefit that power, which would otherwise be wasted while braking and decelerating, can be used to charge the batteries and drive the electric motor. And that readies things for the next time that you want to trickle along in all-electric silence. Once the engine is cut in to dominate proceedings, it'll be a case of making the best selection from the standard drive mode select system, a setup that works via this rotary dial near the gear stick, tweaking the engine output, the throttle response, the gear shift times, and even the air conditioning functionality through three main settings. There's normal if you want to leave the software to do its own thing, but otherwise you can select eco for efficiency or sport for performance motoring that comes with the accompaniment of a red-tinged hue on the instrument panel ahead of you. A button below the controller is provided for a fourth option, snow, which restricts throttle responses to avoid wheel spin on slippery surfaces. Top models also get an extra customized option too, which allows you to tailor drive mode select settings to suit your own personal preferences. Those likely to want to be selecting the system sport option on a regular basis are the folk being targeted by a firmer sprung and more dynamically inclined ISF sport variant, which also comes with the option of an AVS, adaptive variable suspension system, that gives you extra Sport S and Sport S Plus options on the drive mode select controller. Thanks to sensors that automatically adjust the suspension performance at all four wheels in response to your driving style and road surface conditions, AVS enables you to adjust the car precisely to suit the mood you're in and the road you're on. If you do go for an ISF Sport variant, we suggest you'd really have to have this option, because otherwise you'll be stuck with an over-firm passive setup that'll have you feeling every tarmac tear you come across. Neither AVS or F-Sport trim are necessary, though, to appreciate this IS model's status as easily the best handling mainstream Lexus you can buy. Contributing factors here include the development at the fearsome Nürburgring Nordschleife, a near perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and the basic excellence of the multi-link rear suspension design, improvements to which we covered earlier on. The ride's good too, even with the largest 18-inch wheels we're rolling on here. There's just enough suppleness about it to cope with our country's hopeless road surfaces. Plus, the stability control system is one of the best in the business, intervening gently and almost imperceptibly. Get this IS on a test track with all its electronic aids disabled, and if you can work around the gearbox and the hybrid system issues we covered earlier, you'll find a chassis that's as playful and talented as you expect from a car that's enjoyed thousands of hours honing around that infamous bit of tarmac in Germany. As good as anything in the class? Well, we'd say so. Lexus switched decisively from bland to bold with this Mark III Model IS, and this revised version adopts an even more assertive persona. It's difficult to believe that when work first started on this third-generation design back in 2008, the original plan was for it to be a badge-engineered Toyota Avensis. Thankfully, common sense prevailed, and what we ended up with here is a properly credible alternative to the established premium players in this segment. As before, this saloon body style remains all that Lexus is prepared to offer. Well, as for the changes introduced as part of this midterm refresh, well, they're most evident here at the front. Now, there's fresh full LED technology for the reshaped headlamps, and they have a more pronounced look than before, and they better emphasise the smart L configuration of the tick-shaped daytime running light slashes. The main lamp units now extend further inwards towards the subtly restyled spindle-shaped grille, and that blends more smoothly into the sleeker bonnet. An even bigger change, though, has been made to the shape of these lower corner air intakes. They now deliver a more powerful road presence. Move to the side, and if you are familiar with the original version of this third generation design, you'll find things much as before. The shape remains expressive with its muscular front wings and flared wheel arches that now house restyled 16, 17 or, as in this case, 18-inch rims. The strong horizontal belt line is supposed to create an impression of larger rear tyres and a lower centre of gravity. For us, though, a more defining feature lies with this curving crease line that flows from the tail light cluster through the rear wheel arch and down into the lower sill. Now, at the rear, the tail light clusters have been restyled, and they now feature full LED technology. Their trailing edges even incorporate these aero-stabilising fins. Lovely. As ever with the Lexus, the finishing's beautifully done with these razor-sharp shut lines. Now let's move inside. Now with most rivals in this segment, you have to spend quite a lot to get a really luxurious feeling cabin, but in an IS there's a premium feel to the interior right across the range. The update changes made here are as subtle as the outside ones, with perhaps the most significant alteration being a slight reduction in the width of the console that's provided for the audio and ventilation controls. Now that allows these driver and passenger knee pad panels to now run right up into the centre stack, where twin vents are provided, and they're separated by this lovely analogue clock. Above that sits the obligatory infotainment screen. This is the 7-inch monitor that's provided with the Lexus media display fitted to most IS models. This isn't the touchscreen setup you'll find in most rivals, but it works quite effectively via this rotary dial near the gear stick that lets you click through audio, telephone, navigation and car-related segments. Plus there's a section that adds further climate control features. Go for one of the really plush variants, and either as standard or as an option, a larger 10.3-inch screens provided as part of the Lexus premium navigation system. With this, though, you have to have what Lexus calls a remote touch interface controller, essentially an 8-way movable mouse that works a screen cursor and requires quite a subtle touch. Overall, we prefer the functionality of this lesser setup. The driving position is certainly difficult to fault. It places you perfectly in front of a lovely leather-stitched multifunction steering wheel. Through it you view an instrument binnacle with 2 clearly presented dials and a TFT multi-information monitor with information, audio and safety system readouts. The whole setup changes depending on the setting you've chosen in the Drive Mode Select vehicle dynamic system that operates by this second rotary controller by the gear stick. So in normal or eco modes, the monitor between the dial gets either grey or blue colouring, and the left-hand gauge is a hybrid indicator. Select Sport, though, and the colouring turns to red, and the hybrid indicator is replaced by a rev counter. These are detail touches, but then detail touches are what IS owners really appreciate. For example, the touch-sensitive electrostatic switches that you use to adjust the air conditioning temperature, the lovely stitched instrument binnacle top. Oh, and the way the electric windows slow as they gradually close with a lovely softened thud. The piano black strips on the glove box lid and the door panels also look smart, and on this particular sport trim model the cabin is brightened by this smart red leather seat trimming that extends into the doors. Not so good is cabin storage. The glove box is quite small, as are the door pockets, and there's no overhead compartment for your sunglasses. More useful, though, is this lidded storage box that's provided between the front seats, incorporating twin USB ports and an aux-in point. To the left of it lie twin cup holders. Plus, provided you haven't gone for the premium navigation system, behind the infotainment system controller you get this shallow little tray that's just the right size for most smartphones. time to move rearwards. Now, the lengthened wheelbase of this Mark III IS model offers much more rear space than the old pre-2013 second generation design could provide, but it is still fairly compact back here, although that's also the case with most obvious rivals. And there's really only space for two back here, and that's something guaranteed by this extremely prominent transmission tunnel. All models get this centre armrest, which incorporates these twin pop-out cup holders. Finally, let's take a look in the boot. Now, the 480-litre capacity of the minority interest IS200T variant matches the prevailing class standard, but the fact that batteries have to be housed beneath the floor of this hybrid IS300H model robs the trunk area of 30 litres of space. There's no further room beneath the floor either, but you do get a tie-down strap on the right-hand side and 4 chromed tie-down points to keep things in place. Need more space? Well, as we mentioned earlier, there's no estate body style option, but if you've avoided entry-level trim, there is the option of being able to push forward the rear seat backs. Now, a little annoyingly, you can't do that via levers in the boot area. You have to go around to the rear passenger compartment and click on seat shoulder buttons. The revealed space, though, should be sufficient for those times when you want to avoid the home delivery charge after a trip to IKEA. So, what will you pay for one of these? Well, less perhaps than you might think. Almost all customers will want an IS fitted out with hybrid power, and there's only one variant on offer, this IS300H model that we've been trying here, which features a combined output of 223 bhp. Now, it doesn't feature plug-in technology, but that helps keep the price affordable. This package is priced from around £30,000 if you choose this car in its most basic SE guise. Most buyers, though, will want one of the various plusher variants further up the range, all of which feature the advanced Lexus Safety System Plus setup, and which retails somewhere between £32,000 and £40,000 depending on the trim level you're looking at. If you're shopping at the upper end of this bracket and you really don't like the thought of petrol-electric power, then your dealer will suggest you consider the alternative 245 bhp IS200T variant. That's priced from around £39,000. This offers a conventional petrol turbo engine putting out 245 bhp, and it'll save you around £1,000 over a comparably trimmed hybrid derivative. Across the range, you only get auto transmission, an eCVT belt-driven unit in the IS300H, and a conventional 8-speed torque converter auto in the IS200T. Now, bear that auto-only format in mind when you're making competitor comparisons. Whichever of the two IS variants you decide on, there's just this single 4-door body style on offer, although Lexus does offer all the same technology in its 5-door NX crossover model if you like the concept here, but you need extra versatility. So, what kind of value proposition does IS model pricing represent in the closely thought compact executive saloon segment? Well, let's see. In terms of ordinary hybrid technology, by far the most credible direct alternative to an IS300H in this segment is the Mercedes C300H. And the Merc's faster and it's a bit more efficient than an IS300H, but it costs around £37,000. Otherwise, directly comparable parallel hybrid competitors are quite hard to come by in this class. A Ford Mondeo Vignale hybrid is one possible option. Now, that's priced at around £32,000, but it's only got 187 bhp. It's not very efficient, and it won't be perceived as a classy enough proposition by most prospective Lexus buyers. Equally easy to dismiss is the Infiniti Q50 hybrid, which is even less efficient than the Ford. It costs around £43,000, and it's got far more power than most buyers will need. Tougher alternatives for prospective IS300H buyers to dismiss will be those that feature plug-in hybrid power. And because of their lower emissions, plug-in hybrid contenders come with a £2,500 government grant towards purchase. And that's denied to contenders like this Lexus that persevere with ordinary parallel hybrid engines. Now, that can make the plug-in approach look quite tempting. After all, take that grant into account, and around £32,000 can get you a BMW 330e, while if you're prepared to sacrifice status to get a bit of extra space, VW Passat GTE can be yours for around £34,500. In both cases, though, you'd have to spend quite a bit more than that on plusher trim to get a car that can match the kind of classy cabin that comes with all versions of this Lexus. The Japanese brand, though, really doesn't want to go head-to-head with plug-in technology here. Instead, they're positioning this IS300H as a cleaner, quieter alternative to the kind of 2-litre diesel model that most buyers choose in this segment. Similarly performing 2-litre 150 bhp diesel models like the BMW 318D and the Audi A4 2-litre TDI Ultra cost around £31,000 and around £32,000 respectively in their comparable automatic guises. Jaguar XE and 2-litre D 163 bhp auto form, that also costs around £32,000, while a Mercedes C220D auto costs from around £33,000. If you're even considering this IS, though, it's probably because you want something a bit different in this class, in which case you might also want to look at a couple of 2.2-litre diesel auto models priced from around £31,000, the Alfa Romeo Giulia and the Infiniti Q50. Less credible but much cheaper, similarly sized 2-litre diesel alternatives that are priced at around £26,000 include the Volvo S60 D4 and the VW Passat 2-litre TDI. While some may also be prepared to consider the Citroën-derived DS5 model, which in comparable Blue HDI 150 guise costs from around £29,000. Those then are your direct diesel options to an IS hybrid, and all of them are dirtier, they're all noisier, and they all run on more expensive fuel. If you don't actually care about company car economics, but you like the idea of a kind of downsized Lexus limousine, then you might be one of the very few potential customers that are prepared to consider the minority interest petrol turbo IS200T version of this car that I mentioned earlier. In all kinds of ways, though, it's a really tough variant to recommend, and Lexus has hobbled it still further by restricting this engine to 2 top F-Sport and Premier trim levels, which means a need for a near £40,000 asking price. Now, you can match the IS200T's performance for not much more than £30,000 with more efficient 2-litre petrol turbo versions of the Audi, the BMW, the Mercedes, the Jaguar and the Alfa Romeo models we were just talking about. Though, of course, once you spec any of those up to match an IS200T, you would need a Lexus-like budget to buy it. Enough, though, with the comparisons. We're going to assume you've done your homework, you've decided on an IS300H, and if that's the case, then one of the reasons behind your decision is likely to be an expectation of a very complete standard specification. If so, then by and large, you won't be disappointed. Now, mentioned earlier on the entry-level SE version, you do without a lot of the electronic safety kit that's standard elsewhere in the range, and it also lacks modern executive basics like navigation, parking sensors, rain-sensing wipers and folding rear seat backs. You do, though, get quite a lot else at this level, so LED technology for the headlamps, for the daytime running lights and the rear lamp clusters, for example, and there's also 16-inch alloy wheels, power folding heated mirrors, cruise control, an alarm and a drive mode select vehicle dynamic system that lets you tune the car's responses to the way that you want to drive. You also get the Lexus Media Display Infotainment System with its 7-inch centre dash colour monitor, via which you can access a 6-speaker DAB stereo system and Bluetooth phone compatibility. Plus, there are the usual aux-in sockets and USB ports. Probably, though, you're going to want to go beyond SE trim and get yourself a rather nicer IS. So the next step up the range is Executive Edition trim, which adds the full navigation system most business buyers will want, along with the larger 17-inch alloy wheels, rain-sensing wipers, reversing camera, keyless smart entry, dual-zone air conditioning, heated front seats, split folding rear seat backs and adaptive cruise control that adjusts itself to the speed of other vehicles. Now, you can get this same package with more dynamic looks if you go for the mid-range sport variant that we're trying here, which features meaner looking black exterior trim, and that's the colour that's also extended onto larger 18-inch wheels. Or for not much more, you might want to take a more comfort-orientated approach by opting for an advanced variant that features full leather upholstery that at the front gives you power adjustable ventilated seats. If there's more in your budget, though, then nothing but the plushest end of the IS lineup will do. And that's the part of the range that you have to head to if you want the most sophisticated infotainment options. So there are 3 top-end IS models on offer. The first of these, the luxury variant, adds in those missing all-round parking sensors, along with niceties like warm metal inlays. Finally, there are the 2 trim levels that you have to have to get the option of that 200T petrol turbo engine I was talking about earlier, namely sporty F-Sport spec or the ultimate opulence of the flagship Premier model. Most will stick with hybrid power though and enjoy the really premium feel that you get at this end of the lineup. F-Sport buyers get a unique look and feel thanks to 10-spoke 18-inch wheels, bespoke bumpers, an F-Sport mesh grille and instrument gauges that are styled to replicate those used in the Lexus LFA supercar. On a Premier model, well, you get the more sophisticated Lexus premium navigation setup with a larger 10.3-inch screen and a remote touch interface control. Plus, there's a thumping 15-speaker Mark Levinson surround sound audio system, and that has a built-in DVD player, along with niceties like electrically adjustable steering column and laser-cut dark wood trim inlays. Enough with the standard stuff. What about options? Now, unlike its German rivals, Lexus isn't keen on giving its buyers pages and pages of extra cost boxes to tick, which does make life a lot simpler. If you go for the entry-level SE trim, you'll be offered the option of navigation. Now, that's also the case with the luxury or F-Sport variants, although here buyers can further upgrade to the more advanced Lexus premium navigation setup if funds permit. On most mainstream variants, you can choose to pay more for rear parking sensors too. F-Sport buyers can also pay extra for the 15-speaker Mark Levinson audio system, leather upholstery, adaptive variable suspension and special Naguri-style trim inlays. You have to have a Premier trimmed variant if you want the option of a sunroof. As for practicalities, well, providing you avoid entry-level trim, there's the option of a towing pack. Plus, there are the usual roof racks and carriers for things like roof boxes and bikes. You might also want to consider rubber floor mats, a protective film for the door handles, and a stainless steel rear bumper protection plate. For the boot area, there's a trunk liner, horizontal cargo net, and a foldable storage box. On to safety stuff. Now, one of the key changes made to this revised third-generation IS model lies in the fact that, provided you avoid entry-level trim, you get a package of cutting-edge, camera-driven electronic safety features fitted as standard. The brand calls this its Lexus Safety System Plus pack, and it includes 6 key elements. Now, as you'd expect in this day and age, one of those is an autonomous braking system. Lexus calls it a pre-crash system, and it's one of those that scans the road ahead as you drive in search of potential collision hazards. If one's detected, then you'll be warned. Now, if you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Now, that setup's also able to specifically identify people, and it will apply braking if a pedestrian is detected in front of your IS at speeds of between 19 and 50 miles an hour. The other 5 Lexus Safety System Plus features can be quickly covered. Lane departure alert warns dozy drivers who've drifted out of their lanes on the highway. Sway warning sounds an alert and displays a warning if steering input, lane positioning and vehicle sway suggest driver fatigue. Automatic high beam automatically dips the headlights at night. Adaptive cruise control automatically keeps you a safe distance behind the car in front on the highway. And traffic sign recognition will picture road signs on the move and display them for you on the dash. As for a more conventional safety kit fitted to all IS models, well, pretty much everything you'd expect is present and correct. So you can tick off a pedestrian-friendly bonnet, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, and no fewer than 8 airbags, twin front, side and curtain bags, plus knee bags for both front seat passengers. Across the range, you'll also find a tyre pressure warning system and hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. In addition, there are all the usual electronic driving aids for braking, for traction and stability. And these are systems that in most other cars will only activate at the last minute if the situation demands it. In an IS, though, it's all done a bit more cleverly. The so-called Lexus Vehicle Dynamics Integration Management setup will coordinate everything together and take action to correct the car just a little bit earlier. At the top of the IS range, Lexus also offers two further camera-driven safety features. A blind spot monitor works on the move to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car, and a rear cross-traffic alert system warns you of an approaching vehicle when you're reversing out of a parking space. Now, these two systems are optional on an F Sport variant, and they're standard on the top Premier model. Two engines are on offer to IS buyers. Both deliver similar outputs, but one costs nearly twice as much to run as the other. No prizes then for guessing which unit will mop up the most sales. It won't be the 2-litre petrol turbo unit you'll find in the IS 200T. This engine may be smooth, responsive and slightly more efficient than the 2.5-litre V6 of the IS 250 variant it replaced, but the figures, 39.2 mpg on the combined cycle and 167 grams per kilometre of CO2, still struggle in the modern era. On to consider the running costs of the petrol-electric IS 300h hybrid that we're trying here. To get the best figures this car can offer, you'll need the entry-level SE variant with its smaller 16-inch wheels, in which form this car is supposed to be able to return 67.3 mpg on the combined cycle and 97 grams per kilometre of CO2. Rival four-cylinder diesel automatic competitors can now match, and in some cases even better, that sort of economy, but they can't match the cleanliness of this Lexus's emissions, which is why an IS 300h is cheaper than a rival 2-litre diesel for tax. The best a rival Audi A4 2-litre TDI S-Tronic can do is 101 grams per kilometre. A Jaguar XE 2-litre D 163 Auto is 106 grams per kilometre. A BMW 318D Auto is rated at 111 grams per kilometre, and the Mercedes C220D Auto comes in at 112 grams per kilometre. Of course, the emissions of an IS 300h don't look anything like as good if you compare them to the CO2 figures that you get from a plug-in hybrid model, say the kind of BMW 330e or Volkswagen Passat GTE that wouldn't cost you much more. Toyota's Prius plug-in shows us that Lexus has access to this kind of technology, but the brand has clearly decided to keep that back for the next generation version of this car. Bear in mind that, as usual, larger rim sizes make quite a difference to the readings we just quoted. With 17-inch wheels fitted to your IS 300h, you're looking at 65.7 mpg and 101 grams per kilometre, and that means a BIK benefit-in-kind rating that falls from 18 to 19%. Go for the 18-inch rims fitted to our test car, and the figures fall to 61.4 mpg and 107 grams per kilometre, which means a BIK rating of 20%. Now remember that a petrol-electric hybrid model like this one starts out with a 2% BIK advantage over equivalent diesel models. And of course, all IS variants run on petrol, which remains significantly cheaper than the diesel fuel that's used by most of the rivals that buyers will typically be considering this car against. As you expect, to get the full benefit of the potential efficiency of this Lexus, you've got to do your part as a driver, and that means proactive use of the various modes and systems that are provided. Now, to get anywhere near the figures being quoted, you'll have to keep the car locked into the Drive Mode Select's Eco mode, which moderates the throttle response and the engine power output, while also tweaking the climate control. Plus, you'll also need to keep a very careful eye on the hybrid system indicator that replaces the usual rev counter on the dash, and make sure that the needle stays as often as possible in either of the blue eco or charge zones. If you're familiar with the Lexus brand, you'll probably already know that this car uses a full hybrid system, and that's one that can allow the electric motor to operate independently of the petrol engine. Now, thanks to this, the car is often able to revert into an all-electric drive format, and you can even force your IS to operate that way by pressing this EV button down below the gear stick. Now, the EV function is only available for just over a mile, though, and it won't work at all if you exceed 30 miles an hour or if for some reason the batteries aren't charged up. Those in a frugal frame of mind will want to keep an eye on the various graphical screens that are provided by the fascia's large 7-inch Lexus Media Display colour monitor. There are two, one badged past record and the other trip information. Now, the first shows your recent fuel consumption, while the other builds on that with information on your operating range and your average speed. Another option on the screen is the useful energy monitor, and that's there to show at a glance at any time what's being charged or driven by what. There's a strong environmental argument to make too, given that an IS300H emits NOx emissions that are way down on what you'd be smoking out at the wheel of a diesel. Of course, during much of your urban motoring in this Lexus, let's say when you're inching along in traffic, you've got the engine seamlessly disabled, the EV mode activated, and battery power in motion, well, you won't be emitting any emissions at all. In terms of other things worth knowing, you'll want to note that owners of conventional hybrid models like this one no longer qualify for free congestion charging. And another annoyance is that Lexus doesn't copy the 5-year warranty that parent company Toyota offers with the same technology. So on this IS, you'll get the same kind of 3-year, 60,000 mile deal that you'll get with German rivals. You'll want to know about depreciation. As ever, the IS fares pretty competitively here. According to independent experts CAP, after 3 years and 60,000 miles, your IS is likely to be worth about 36% of what you originally paid for it. Insurance groupings vary between 28E and 30E for the IS300H hybrid model, with the IS200T variant rated at Group 35E. And finally, let's cover the maintenance implications of running an IS300H, which might turn out to be a clinching factor for those considering this Lexus hybrid against a comparable diesel rival. Now, there's nothing particularly unusual about the servicing regime. Garage visits for all IS models are required once a year or every 15,000 miles, whichever comes first. Necessary work alternates between intermediate and full services. At 60,000 miles and 100,000 miles, though, your IS will need a bit more attention with the so-called full plus 60 and full plus 100 checks. What's more noteworthy, though, is the fact that these garage visits should cost you significantly less than would be the case with a diesel rival, thanks to the low maintenance requirements that are built into the hybrid Synergy Drive system. As part of this, there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, no drive belts to break, maintenance-free timing chain, there's no particulate filter to get clogged up with diesel fumes, and of course, thanks to the CVT auto gearbox, there's no clutch either. The hybrid setup has a good record for minimising tyre wear, and its battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps extend the life of the brake pads. Over 60,000 miles of driving, the front pads should need replacing only once, while the rear pads and all the discs will probably last the full distance. What else? Are you worried about the complexity of the hybrid system? Well, don't be. There are over 8 million Toyota-engineered hybrids reliably pounding global roads, and the facts are that hybrid technology generates fewer warranty claims than conventional petrol or diesel engines do. Anyway, the hybrid system gets its own 5-year warranty, and you can choose to further extend that every year in the first decade of ownership, with no limits on total mileage. There's also a 12-year anti-corrosion and perforation warranty, and a 3-year paintwork and surface rust warranty. Already, this IS has been a quietly successful model line for Lexus, clocking up over 1 million sales, with 6,000 new owners taking delivery every month. It could be, though, that its most significant years are yet to come. With the future of diesel increasingly shrouded in doubt, the brand's decision to persevere with hybrid power as an alternative to mainstream black pump fuel motoring is now starting to look very clever indeed. So it's a good time for the company to have sharpened up the act of this now more sharply styled and more sophisticated third generation model. It still isn't going to attract many takers in its conventional IS200T guise, but look at it closely in the hybrid IS300H form we've been trying here, and you'll find an awful lot to like, provided that you're prepared to make a few compromises in a few areas. Don't go expecting a choice of body styles or a wide range of different power options. And although on the road the ride and handling is now much improved, the engineers haven't been able to do very much about the way that the vague response from the thrashy CVT auto gearbox still rather undermines the driving experience. There's plenty to put up against that though. If a need to keep your spend to no more than £30,000 means that you're looking at the entry-level IS300H model, you'll find that nothing else priced at the same level in the compact executive saloon segment is quieter, cleaner or more affordable to tax. Spend more on a plusher variant like this one and you start to have to take into account cleaner plug-in hybrid segment alternatives, but even then the classy feel of this Lexus can be difficult to resist. Add in the arresting looks and a dealer network that's routinely steeped in praise by every survey going, and the result is a car many may now want to reconsider. In summary, it's the best small Lexus yet made, and that makes it a very desirable thing indeed.